Dunwoody. My name is Brandon Adams. I'm joined here by the former Georgia quarterback David Greene. And of course, next to him, Marlowe's, Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. It's our Dog Nation big game preview as we look ahead to Georgia, Florida on Saturday. And of course, hanging out with a whole bunch of great Georgia fans here at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody. It's already been an outstanding night. David, certainly appreciate you being a part of it, and how much fun has it been to hear about the enthusiasm, the excitement on the part of so many Georgia fans about getting back after it on Saturday. Put the bad taste of the LSU game in the rearview mirror here and look forward to a better game. You've heard from a lot of Georgia fans here tonight who are definitely eager to do just that.
Well, one thing for sure, Georgia fans are passionate. No different tonight. Got a big crowd out here at Marlowe's Tavern, and the excitement building to this game seems year in and year out. There's so much at stake in this game, and this year's no different.
And Jeff, when you look ahead to that cocktail party, it's the game that you and I talk about a lot over the course of the year because of how much it means to me. And you get the sense, because of the fact that Georgia's ranked high, Florida's ranked higher than certainly I probably thought they would be at the beginning of the season. It feels like one of those throwback deals where both sides come in to the game on Saturday at 3:30 on CBS feeling like it's a season maker, a season breaker. I have to admit there's some extra excitement in this game for me, just given the fact that there is so much hype building around the game.
I tell you, it kind of seems old school, Brandon, because in the years gone by, the Dooley years, everybody thought those old school Bulldogs, they would say, I know what type of team Georgia will have when they get off the banks of the St. Johns River and how they navigate that mess with the Florida Gators. And this is just a huge game. I know everybody tries to sell, but all this momentum that Georgia has marshaled up so far in the Kirby Smart era, lose that game, and all of a sudden a lot of people start wondering if there's some of that bloom off that Rose Bowl a little bit.
Yeah, we'll certainly watch for that, and we'll talk a lot about that here as part of our broadcast tonight. So if you're not lucky enough to be with us here at the Marlowe's Tavern in Dunwoody, settle in. We'll have some Georgia football with you here on the Dog Nation video channels, and we'll take some of your comments both on Facebook and YouTube coming up here in just a moment with Jeff Sintel, David Greene, and myself, Brandon Adams. I'll also remind you that if you want to know about the next time a big event like this comes to the Marlowe's Tavern closest to you, the best way for you to learn more about that's to become a Marlowe's insider. Text the word Marlowe's, no apostrophe here, just MARLOWS to the number 24242. Once again, Marlowe's to 24242, and you can become a Marlowe's Tavern insider. I know back on the 4th of July, for instance, they had a great offer for everyone on the insiders list, so it's one of the reasons why you want to do that, because you get a chance to really find out about some really cool stuff happening in the Marlowe's Tavern close to you. And David, as I said to Jeff, we do talk about Georgia, Florida a lot around here. I've always been a big believer that it's the rivalry for Georgia that's supposed to matter more than any other. You played in this game. You had the thrill of a victory against Florida in 2004. What does the rivalry personally mean to you? If we're going to be honest here, you also had some heartbreaking games there in Jacksonville, which only fuels the fire, I think, for Georgia fans to see another win again this year. I mean, what does this rivalry overall mean to you?
I'll say this. When I played, I think it's a little different than what it is now, because we'd had so much failure over a 20-year period. And I know when I was there, we almost ran into the situation where we wanted to win so bad that I think at times we actually hurt ourselves because we made it actually bigger than what it really was. Yeah. I think Georgia's had a lot more success over the last few years, and so I think for the most part it's just a big game in the East. Now, of course, for the fan base, it's crazy. I mean, they got fall breaks, school closes down because students didn't come to class whether school was in session or not. But there's so much riding on this game because typically whoever is going to win this game is in position to win the East.
Jeff, David brings up a really interesting point that if you go back to that era, there clearly was almost a mental hang-up about Georgia versus Florida. Yeah. But it's 42-7 a year ago. Is there any of that stuff left in the atmosphere here, or is this something that the program has put behind it? Do you think Georgia fans are still traveling down I-16, I-95, whatever route they're taking to get there? Are there Georgia fans who are still traveling down to St. Simons, where we'll be on Friday, or Amelia Island, where some of the folks I was just talking to are going to be hanging out this weekend, or Jacksonville? Is some of that still baked into the cake here as far as some of the Georgia fans who are traveling down?
Well, I think there's definitely trepidation, especially the way that LSU game went down, and there's so many questions right now regarding the Georgia program. And I tell you what, Brandon, you've got this team, and I think Florida fans, if you had asked them a year ago, they were looking at Georgia like, oh my gosh, is this their market correction? Is Kirby about to put a spurrier on this rivalry? And all of a sudden, then you see these comments, the blind squirrel comments. And remember at SEC Media Days when one of Florida's staunchest defenders say it's going to feel really good this year when we beat them?
Yeah.
Make no mistake, those quotes have been circulated around the Butts-Mehre building this week.
I mean, David, why is that Florida seemingly always has somebody, whether, you don't go back years and years and years, last year's game, this year's game.
Routes.
Yeah, it just seems like this is a program that's very comfortable with the bulletin board material before the game, whereas a lot of times it seems like Georgia goes out of its way to avoid that kind of thing. Florida takes a very different tack. What is it about the Gators that seems to breed that kind of, in some cases, foolish trash talk?
Look, it starts with the leadership from the top and the head coach. I'm a little shocked that Dan Mullen will allow his players to say that. I think if one of our players were to say that, they'd probably run until they puke, every day at practice. But yeah, I mean, because Coach Mullen, I mean, he's made a few comments even before the season started.
Right.
And I think, look, that's part of his deal. It starts with leadership at the top, and Kirby's not going to allow that to happen. But at the end of the day, the speaking's done by your play on the field.
And Jeff, I will admit there's a part of me that's a little bit hypocritical on this, because on the one hand, I want to be, as a Georgia fan, upset with a Florida player when they say those things about Georgia, and yet on the other hand, I also talk about the intensity of this rivalry, ratcheted up a bit. I think sometimes both these sides have been guilty of not talking about this game enough. If you're Florida, you could talk about Florida State, or you could talk about Tennessee. If you're Georgia, you could talk about Georgia Tech or Auburn. Those are great rivals for UGA as well. So if they're talking about you, it's making the rivalry bigger, even if the trash talk in some cases, like what happened in 2017 with Chauncey Gardner, was totally misguided. It only serves to make the game itself bigger, and in a weird way, that is kind of a win for both sides, because there is no denying that the heat is going to be turned up in the building.
Makes you wonder if a certain type of player needs to jack themselves up by saying something like that before the game. You referenced that they said Jake Fromm, all he does is throw slant routes, and then DeAndre Swift catches a slant route and then gets to break out his truck stick. Speaking of truck sticks, did you see the comments about Elijah Holyfield truck sticks guys? And
sure.
Florida's got some guys that will truck stick him back. All this is clutter.
Right.
If anybody that grew up in the state of Georgia, I remember, I'm a wee lad. You tailgate, you're around this stadium, and it doesn't happen anymore. But there's this story that's it's ingrained in my brain. Georgia fans would have these rubber lizard alligators, and they'd be on a string, and they would stick them in front of the cars that would be driving around trying to park.
Oh, sure.
And the Georgia fan would go over it, and he'd back up, they'd honk the horn, and then the Florida fans would veer out of the way not to roll over that gator. Now that sounds so silly, and that sounds so stupid, but that sounds so much Georgia, Florida to me.
I will say this, and he said it from the top. The big story, I think, in this game is the momentum of the programs. You got Kirby Smart, and we've had so much momentum from recruiting, taking them to the national championship last year. Dan Mullen, they've gotten a lot better through this year.
Yeah.
So if we were to come out there and lose this game, it's going to kill momentum, and it's going to give Florida a huge momentum boost.
And what you're talking about is a dose of tension to what is already an intense rivalry. And now you got a little bit of anxiety and nerves because of what's at stake for both the teams this season, the programs in general. And David, that reminds me of something other former very good players have told me in the past is when you get into a rivalry game like this, it's sometimes not about turning up your intensity. It's about turning down those emotions and being level-headed on game day. I mean, I would imagine that's as much of a strategy here as getting fired up. I mean, what do you tell a player here about don't peak too early, don't be too energetic, you go out there and get yourself a 15-yard penalty? How do you deal with that?
It's the old play that Nick Saban talks about. Only worry about the things that you can control. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype. It's so easy to worry about my friends, my family's going to be down here. There's so much excitement for the game. I've always dreamed of playing this game. That doesn't help you. That really can only hurt you. Your job is to go out there and execute your assignments. And if you can take the emotion out of it, at least that worked for me. Take the emotion out of it. Just concentrate on the X's and O's and just doing your assignment.
Well, along those lines, one of the things you hear players talk about a lot, another crop of players have said that again this week, that it's driving over the bridge, it's seeing all the tailgating going on around the stadium when the team buses arrive there. It's the 50-50 split of the crowd. In a lot of ways, it is very different than another game. As a player, how easy is it to block that kind of stuff out? Or do you end up feeling like it's almost like a bowl game during the regular season? I mean, on the field, in the game, you started in this game, 4 times? On the field, in the game, I mean, does it feel like just another football game, or does it have that feeling of being different?
I think it depends on the way the coaches set the whole mentality that week. Now, if coaches treat it like, hey, look, guys, this is just another game. It means a lot. This is the next game up. We got to bring our best. It's not as big of a deal. But if it turns into you can feel the intensity out there and the coaches are nervous about what's going on and, hey, this is a huge game, it's a must-win game, then you start kind of freaking out a little bit going, hey, it feels different. But the way Kirby's going to treat it like he does any other game, he's just going to say, look, we got a game plan, we got to execute, this is what they do well, this is how we need to beat them. Let's just worry about the X's and O's of the game. We can't worry about our positioning and what everybody's saying on the outside. You just got to concentrate on just playing the game.
That is David Greene, Jeff Sintel, the Dog Nation's recruiting insider here as well. My name is Brandon Adams. We're live at the Marlows in Dunwoody for our Dog Nation Big Game Preview. Become a Marlows insider if you have not already. Text the word Marlows, M-A-R-L-O-W-S, no apostrophe, just M-A-R-L-O-W-S to 24242, and you can become a Marlows insider. Jesse Landrum in our Facebook comment section was talking about the battle of the quarterbacks here. Felipe Franks, who I will admit on the Gators side, I don't view Franks as being a top-flight quarterback, and one of the suggestions in the comment section is when Georgia does throw it, that is sort of a baseline need on Saturday to see Jake Fromm outperform, or Justin Fields when he's in the game, but to see the Georgia quarterbacks outperform Felipe Franks at a very baseline performance here. That's a big part of the recipe for Georgia on Saturday, right?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Which guy would you rather have if they were out on a sand lot and you're going to say, I want that quarterback or that quarterback? Let's face it, that's going to be the biggest start of Felipe Franks' life. And Georgia's quarterback, by countermeasure, has started at least 4 or 5 ball games that are as big as this. I think what adds to the trepidation for this rivalry for me in this particular game is there's so much tension everywhere. That's a word I gravitated toward when you said it. There's Georgia's tension about who's our running back. Is it Swift? Is it Elijah? And I mean the go-to bull running back. Who's the quarterback? Is it still Jake? What can Justin give you? There's so much tension is what this will mean to the SEC East. And to your point, what David said a minute ago is what this staff does is takes a big moment and they reduce the moment. Kirby Smart's going to say things like physicality, composure, do your job, get your run fits, most importantly on defense. That's the big bellwether stat of the game for me, for Bulldogs, is who's going to make those tackles. When you look at Georgia's top 5 tacklers this year, only one of those guys is a linebacker. And that, to me, at any level, says you got problems in the middle of your team.
And David Don Williams, also in our Facebook comment section, was talking about something that you and I were actually talking about when you first arrived here to Marlows tonight, which is these Georgia fans that wonder what happened to that running game against LSU. Why did Georgia go away from Elijah Holyfield? And Don, like many others in our comment section, saying that's something I want to see Georgia get back to against Florida. Let's feed 13. Let's hopefully feed a healthy number 7 DeAndre Swift. Let's lean on a Georgia running game, which has been kind of the recipe here.
I'm telling you, Saturday I was watching at home on my TV, and I was wanting to throw something through the TV because at 95% of the game, look, it was a 2-possession ball game.
Sure.
There was no need to panic.
Sure.
And it was Fromm's. It was his toughest outing. He wasn't comfortable Saturday. I think everybody could feel it. And we had something good going in the running game.
Yeah.
Holyfield was punishing that number 26. And it is not a situation where you run it 3 times in a row, the same play and punt. It's you do that on first down at 2nd and 5. Then you do the play action passer. You get some kind of rhythm and balance. And that's the one thing that's plagued Georgia really all year. We've won a lot of games by double digits, but we come away from that game going, it didn't seem like we got a rhythm.
That's a fair point to bring up. And now you turn the page here, and you bring up the LSU game. We'll talk about that a little bit more here. Georgia did lose the game last year. Georgia lost at Auburn, and almost immediately turned that page, got into a nice rhythm, and went on a nice run towards the college football playoff at the end of the year. Georgia's in a position where it has to bounce back again on Saturday after having lost to LSU. Is it easier said than done? I mean, I think there's some Georgia fans who feel like maybe Georgia's either incapable of turning the page, or some Georgia fans who feel like it's just going to be very easy to see them turn the page because that's what the team did a year ago. I mean, what is it like in actuality to bounce back from the LSU game against a big-time opponent like Florida on Saturday?
The key is you just got to keep getting better. I mean, you're going to face adversity. You're going to have good times. You're going to have adversity. You got to go out there every day with the mindset of how can I get better. The one concern I think that took place, especially in LSU, and it's happened a couple of weeks before that, is we've missed opportunities.
Yeah.
Big, especially offensively, just not executing well. We're having a hard time getting in a rhythm. And then when we finally have a play presents itself to hit a big one, we're missing it. And that's been the key. That was one of the key differences from last year. We hit them every time last year. I don't think Fromm missed a single guy downfield. And then we just haven't been able to get in some kind of balance. The fortunate thing is we got a lot of weapons. We certainly can do it. I think every Georgia fan knows that we're very capable of scoring a lot of points, and we've got guys that have been in the trenches and know how it works, but they just got to turn it on.
And, go ahead, Jeff.
This is the thing, and we had this in our pre-show chat, our pre-show talk. You mentioned Georgia loses to Auburn.
Right.
But they knew they're going to come back with Sony. They're going to come back with Javon Wims in the back shoulders. They're going to come back with Nick Chubb. I challenge anybody on this feed right now. Lots of people are going to predict a Georgia victory. I would be interested to see how they think this team will get it done, because I honestly don't know. Like, what does Georgia need to get back to in order to win football games?
You said it. I'm hoping in the staff meetings this week and last week, they're in there saying, all right, what is our blueprint?
Yeah.
Who are we? And I think that's the one thing nobody can honestly say, this is who we are as a Georgia football team. We don't know. We're just we've had a lot of guys come in and out. We tried a lot of different things. We've got to get to the point where we can just do a few things really well versus doing a lot of things okay. And it seems like through this year, we've done a lot of things just mediocre.
And along those lines, Jeff, one of the things that David brought up a moment ago was the need to continually getting better. I think one of the things that you and I very much see eye to eye on, our belief is that part of Georgia's quest towards getting better means a little bit different personnel here as you move towards the month of November, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I know Kirby Smart has raved about Jordan Davis, the nose guard, the freshman nose guard, during practice this week. Early in the season, he challenged him to slim down. It seems like Davis may have actually done that a little bit here. But it's an example of a player that wasn't playing in September, at least a lot, that's going to be playing maybe a lot final Saturday in October, heading towards November. When you and I think about Georgia getting better, I think you and I both are on the same page here. We think in some cases it's different personnel that allows improvement to take place.
I think Georgia needs to see. I think they know what they can get out of Jawan Taylor and Natrez Patrick. I just wonder how close. Everybody talks about the quarterback position. How close is that guy to the starter? I wonder how close Channing Tindall is, the guy that goes sideline to sideline, was a U.S. Army All-American. How close is Quay Walker? How close are those guys? They may do the wrong stinking thing, but they're going to do the wrong thing aggressively and violently for Georgia. Jordan Davis is another name. You got to get a little bit better. And you're talking about guys that have been around the program for 4 and 5 years. Jawan Taylor. Tate Crowder has played nice in space. And then Monty Rice. Is he healthy? A lot of times with what Georgia's trying to do, they could never get all the King's horses and King's men healthy. I think Georgia's operations, I think the way Georgia comes out of ball games would be different if Ben Cleveland was still a robust, big-time young man, big country there at right guard. And I think a lot of things when you look at Georgia is Swift all the way back yet. You see flashes, but you don't see the vintage Swift everybody saw from last year. You know what, I'll tell you how they could do it? I would like to see a game plan that says Elijah touches it 15 times, DeAndre touches it 15 times, and Riley Ridley gets about 8 or 9 targets.
That's the problem. Nobody's getting enough touches to really get into a flow of a ball game. And defensively, you talked about a second ago, there's been a concern is we haven't been able to stop the running game, I think, like any of us thought, including Kirby. I mean, he's mentioned it. He thought we could stop the run, and we just haven't been able to do it.
I think you're bringing up 2 really good points there. And to start on the offensive side of the ball, David, it's almost like the basketball analogy of a shorter bench. As you get into your bigger games, it's a shorter bench that's necessary. In September, you're playing a lot of 21-point underdogs. You do overwhelm those teams with just your, the total number of players you're able to play. But in a crunch time game, which is what Florida is, what LSU was supposed to be, in a crunch time game, you got to pick your guy. And I'm not so sure Jeff doesn't have the right name in mind at the wide receiver position. This may be Riley Ridley's time to shine.
Look, I'll say this. I haven't played the game. You need guys to be able to get into a flow in a rhythm of the game. There's nothing worse as a quarterback starting out and you hand the ball off for the first 5 minutes and you go, I've got to get into a flow going downfield and throwing the ball. And there's nothing that feels better than when you start hitting a couple of passes and you walk down the field, okay, let's line up and do it again.
Yeah.
You can get into a rhythm. If you look at the touches, I mean, guys are only getting 5 or 6 touches, and you look and you go, man, this guy's great. He had a great game, but he hardly touched the ball.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And then, Jeff, on the other point that David brings up on the defense, the issues with stopping the run. I continue to believe that's the kind of thing that can be corrected, but am I going to end up, and I hate to ask such a negative question, but it is on my mind here, am I going to end up just being disappointed that no, what showed up against Missouri and what showed up in, at least to a certain extent versus Vanderbilt, what showed up in a big way versus LSU, and LSU has not really moved the football on anybody this season, that this is just who Georgia is, that Georgia just for whatever reason is just not stout on its front seven stopping the run. I mean, are we going to, after Saturday, in danger of just saying identity-wise, that's who Georgia had proven itself to be heading into this game? I hope that's not the case, but how would you respond?
I think every coach that's worth his whistle or those way too tight shorts, they're probably going to say one thing: the eye in the sky does not lie. And sometimes what you are through 7 games is what you are. Look at Georgia. Think about the way they've won games. Remember that Missouri game? A lot of special teams, flair, block punts, things like that. I think the biggest edge Georgia has in terms of this game is they've recruited better. We reported on our show today that Georgia has 67 4-star and 5-star players on the roster that have came to Athens since 2015. Florida's number is 37. So that's 30 more players that you should have. You got to coach them up. And that's one thing the staff in Athens should do. They should coach them up. But what you got to do is look at Georgia's very best player. I think Georgia's very best, most dependable player is Rodrigo Blankenship. I think maybe Mecole Hardman as a punt returner. 3 phases of the game, Georgia prides itself on that. I think that's how they separate themselves from Florida.
Watching the game last week, one thing that was a huge concern that LSU did, we come out at halftime, and I'm watching the defense, and it's probably 8 minutes to go on the clock. I mean, the guys had just been in halftime, 30 minutes ago. And LSU's running the ball down our throat, and they're doing a hurry up. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th down.
Sure.
8 minutes to go. Our guys were gassed. Our front 4, I mean, you got 8 minutes to go in the 3rd quarter. Halftime was not that long ago.
Right.
And our guys are flat-footed.
Yeah.
The guys drop back to pass, and I'm going, this is a concern. You may see Florida and more teams starting to do this, trying to wear our guys down and not allow us to substitute on defense.
Yeah, I think that's really well said by the former Georgia quarterback there, David Greene. My name is Brandon Adams, Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. We're glad to be with you tonight at the Marlowe's Tavern in Dunwoody for our Dog Nation Marlowe's Big Game Preview, looking ahead to the cocktail party on Saturday. Of course, we'll be there starting on Friday for a whole big fun weekend, but our week there begins here with great stuff at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody here tonight. And before we wrap things up, there's one subject we obviously have to address when you have a former quarterback on hand. You got to talk about quarterbacks here. David, as you know, it's been the number one topic of conversation here over the last couple of weeks. Even if it's not the most pressing issue that Georgia's facing, it's still gotten the most conversation. And maybe I'm a Pollyanna, maybe I'm trying to have it in a way that's just not going to be able to be had, but I still think there's a scenario out there where you can be fair to both Fromm and Fields. Fromm had a bad game against LSU. This guy was working on a very good career before that. I think he's still on pace for a very good career at Georgia. I don't want to cast Fromm aside just on the basis of one bad game. To me, that's unfair. And yet, when I also look at Justin Fields, we are in an era now where freshman quarterbacks play. Trevor Lawrence is playing at Clemson. Tua Tagovailoa started playing last year in the national championship game in Alabama as a sophomore quarterback. He's the starter there now. It almost seems also unfair to Fields not to give him a chance on the field to show what kind of prospect he is. Does he fit into the Tua Trevor Lawrence category, or is he a slightly lesser prospect here? I think there's a way to still be fair to both Fromm and Fields. Is that an impossibility?
No, it's not an impossibility. The situation right now is challenging. You've got Jake Fromm, who appears to have lost a little bit of confidence. He's not playing, or he's missed some opportunities that he would hit last year. He's not executing at the level he was, so his confidence is down a little bit. And you got Fields, when he's had an opportunity to come in, at least in the bigger games, he hadn't been able to do anything but run the football, and he's talented. So it seems like both of them are kind of negatively impacted by this. You got 2 tremendously talented guys. Look, I'm high on Fromm. Be able to take us to the national championship, put us in a position to win as a true freshman. But there's no question. He knows it. We all know it. If we want to be a championship level team, he's got to play better. There's no question about it. But if you're going to let Fields play, unleash him. Let him run wild. We know he can throw the football. We've seen him do it. Even in the games, he's extremely accurate. If you're going to let him in there, don't just run the football. It's a little too predictable.
Yeah, there's so many comparisons. I think everybody brings up the Chris Leak, Tim Tebow model and how that worked for Florida and those Gators in their championship. And everybody brings up David and DJ. And I think the one thing that's different that makes that situation feel a little bit more organic is I've heard the stories from David and Shock. They said basically Coach Rick sat him down before before the game and said, David, you got the first 2 series. I don't care if you walk on water or if you drown in water, you got the first 2 series. And then Shock had the 3rd series, and that was his series to just take the offense in any direction he wanted to do. And I think, does Georgia evolve to that? If there's some sort of happy medium where Jake plays about 70% of the game and Justin plays about 30% of the game, I know everybody's sitting there a little too itchy on the trigger finger about a changing of the guard and what could happen. And I agree with David. What Jake Fromm has done in his first 22 games, 23 games as a Georgia quarterback, especially, you can check off an SEC title, played in a national championship game, led them in some dire straits on a neutral side in a bowl game. There's not many guys in Georgia history. There's about 3 or 4 guys that you can start calling off names that have done that. This guy's one of them.
Sure.
And I just think right now the coaches know and they see things in practice. And everybody talks about unleashing Fields right now. Well, if they haven't seen it in practice, that's where the trepidation is about bringing that out in the cocktail party and in the Gator Bowl.
And the truth is, David, as much as it generates the most interest, in addition to being the most important position in the sport, these are also pretty dynamic prospects. They just draw a lot of eyeballs and conversations towards them. I mean, there is a chance, and it's probably a pretty good chance, this is actually not Georgia's most significant issue. Establishing its running game, stopping the opponent's run,
exactly.
That's actually probably a bigger issue for Georgia than what's going on with the quarterbacks.
Right, and I would say this, though, with the quarterbacks at Jake, the number one priority I would have as a fan is making sure Jake is playing with the confidence that he's played.
That's a good point.
Because he's proven.
Yeah.
He's battle tested. He's been in the trench. He's been in the tough games on the way and has proven himself. I think no doubt Fields is talented. We've seen him throw the ball. We think we know what he's capable of doing. He hadn't done it yet. I mean, he hadn't been given the opportunity either. But when you look at the other areas, I mean, the punts, for example, we got a tremendous talented punter, but we've had chances to pin him inside. Field possession is a huge part of this game if you want to win championships. We've kicked him out of the end zone. We've shanked some punts. Defensively, we can't stop the run. If you can't stop the run, you're going to have a hard time winning games, a hard time winning championships. Offensively, you got to find identity. Who are we? What is our blueprint that we're going to win? And we're either going to win this way or we're going to lose this way, but this is who we are.
Jeff, what do you think about Alan Jackson's comment here on YouTube who says it's not impossible, you can keep Fromm the starter, but don't place Fields in the box by making him just a Wildcat quarterback, which is kind of what he has been a couple times here. Is that a fair statement by Alan here that this can still be Fromm's team, but when Fields is going to play, as David said, take the handcuffs off here and let him be, let him be a dynamic player.
Let's face it, everybody wants to see what the number 2 guy can do. And we just spoke about how DJ and David coexisted and was good for Georgia when they were both there. I don't remember DJ working as a read option or as a handoff guy, and then him having a play, and then David running back in there as well. The one thing I will say, and I've watched Jake for a lot of time, and everybody's sitting there trying to think, okay, he's had a bad game. And I say that word a lot, changing of the guard. I just want to see Jake play the way I've seen him play, and that is having fun, going out there, and not worrying about his read.
Sure.
Maybe his boy made a block or his boy made a catch and then made the defender miss and then running downfield. When I see Jake Fromm having fun out there on Saturday, that's when I know he's in a good spot.
Well, the one thing I was going to say, you take the page from Alabama. The best case scenario, you got Tua playing unbelievable football, and when Jalen Hurts gets his time to play, he's played a lot better than he did last year. In the role of a coach, and they got to find a way to do this, you got to find a way to your players to play at their best. We know what Jake's capable of, and we think we know what Justin is capable of.
Well, and let me actually get a thought from you on both of you guys on this as we get ready to wrap up here. Brooker, Chico, Derek in our Facebook comment section was talking about the need for Jake Fromm to get off to a faster start against Florida than he got off against LSU. I mean, how do you play call here to increase his confidence? Obviously, you want to stay on a 3rd and long here, but what do you do to get him feeling better about himself?
You create some balance. I think watching the game last week, were they throwing 3 times or we're running 3 times? No. Let's run the ball, get 4 yards. Let's set up a play action pass, get a first down. There's something about completing a pass, getting a first down, walking down the field and getting huddled up, say, all right, here we go again. When you can get them off balance and you've got a balanced attack, it's going to make the quarterback position a lot easier.
Yeah, the winning game plan for Georgia, we started thinking about how that possibly happens. And listen, no one really knows because this team hasn't shown how they're going to win a game. But you have Grantham and what he likes to do. You got to think shots to the tight end, but you also, most importantly, got to think about the screen game and just getting rid of the ball. And a quarterback, when you start completing bubbles in those short throws, and as long as you're moving downfield, you feel like you're in a big rhythm, and you can build off that.
Quick final thought from me. I know that a lot seems to have changed here with Georgia. Some seems to have changed with Florida. Florida probably rated higher and had a better record than we would have thought at this time, and maybe some Georgia fans feeling some feelings they didn't expect to feel this year coming off the loss to LSU. But David, for me, ultimately, not that much has truly changed with this game. This was a game in which I was confident in Georgia before the season started. That, for me, has not changed. I still feel like this is about a 2-touchdown win for Georgia.
I do, too. The one thing I like to say is we can make Florida one-dimensional, which I think we can. We talked about Felipe Franks and not being a great passer. If we can commit to stuffing that running game and make Felipe Franks have to try to beat us downfield, we should be in a good situation. If we can find some balance and a blueprint on offense, I think we win by 2 touchdowns.
Quick final thought from you, Jeff?
Yeah, I just think it's probably going to be closer than most teams might expect, simply because you got to know what is Georgia going to win with. I think you got to find that out in this football game, and I know it's going to be a huge game for the program, and I do think Georgia's going to come out with a victory. I think they have better personnel, especially in special teams, but this is a game. Brandon, you say this a lot. Somebody needs to go out and have a painting game, in which means somebody makes a play that's revered, whether it's the catch or the takeoff
or the hobnail boot, maybe.
Yeah, this is one of those games where it feels like whether it's a Miko Hardman, an Isaac Nada who grew up in Jacksonville for a time.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those times for a Bulldog to sit there, and everybody talks about leaders and players making plays, but this is a time when Georgia needs to lean on somebody. Big stat for me, last night I'll say, can you believe we've gotten to week 8 of the season, and I think Georgia's leading rusher is Elijah, who has a 101-yard game. That's the highest rushing total for a Bulldog.
We need a Georgia player to step up and lead. There's no question about that.
That's well said by David Greene. How about our audience here? How many of you feel good about the Dogs on Saturday against Florida? Sounds like the folks here feeling good about that. For Jeff Sintel and David Greene, my name is Brandon Adams. Thanks so much for being with us for our Dog Nation Marlowe's Big Game Preview. Don't forget, we were in Dunwoody tonight, but we'll be back next week at the Brookhaven location. Looking ahead to the big game against Kentucky Wildcats. We'll see you there coming up of Tuesday and next week there at the Brookhaven location. Looking forward to that. But for now, we'll say goodnight to you here from Dunwoody. Thanks so much for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Jeff Sintel will see you there at dognation.com, and then we'll be in St. Simon's on Friday, getting ready for the cocktail party on Saturday. Y'all have a great night, everybody.